And that is another area where the terrorist rebels are taking it on the chin. Finally, then, the key area, there's a large offensive against the rebels in the area of Aleppo. And that can quite possibly lead to the liberation of what is either the largest or the second largest, right? You see different views of this. It's either Damascus or it's Aleppo, the largest or second largest city in Syria. So all of the areas. I have to say now, we were getting some optimistic reports from the area of Palmyra. It looks like Palmyra in the middle of this is the one area where ISIS still may be able to mount a counterattack, and therefore the Syrian Arab Army is reinforcing its positions in and around Palmyra. And when I say Syrian Arab Army, it goes without saying that they're often accompanied by Hezbollah, who add extra punch to this coalition, right? To these events. So there was an attempted counteroffensive by the terrorist rebels around Aleppo, and that seems to have been defeated. Okay, you look at these areas, right? You look at Damascus, you look at Homs, you look at Aleppo, and then you look at this area around Kasab. And the common denominator is ISIS is losing big everywhere. Around Raqqa. Now, Raqqa has been clobbered, right? Raqqa has been clobbered by Russia, and now it's being clobbered by France, right? The obvious thing to do with your Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier is to hit Raqqa. So they are doing that, and we're told that there's an alarm in Raqqa that they're so afraid of what's going to happen around Aleppo in particular that they've organized an emergency hysterical convoy of a couple of hundred of these Toyotas with machine guns and sent that on the roads to Aleppo. Problem being that they're getting attacked from the air. In other words, they're getting strafed, and it's apparently it's a killing field, right? They're being really heavily damaged. Who knows if any of those Toyotas or Isuzus or whatever they are will ever get near Aleppo. A couple of other things that are interesting. The principal ISIS radio station in northern Syria has been destroyed by the Russian Air Force. Now, what I'm giving you is a kind of a summary of these things, which we put together yesterday for the Tax Wall Street Party daily briefing, and that's what you should think of. So the ISIS is all their wonderful, sophisticated media skills, right? All the wonderful media skills that the American media keeps telling us about. They're going to have a hard time with that because their radio transmitter has been destroyed. The other thing, which some of these combat reports that I've seen have pointed out, is that first of all, that the rebel groups, to some extent, are fighting among themselves. These rebels that a lot of people want to make the government of Syria. They want to have them in the government. Those rebels are fighting among themselves already, right? Who's going to get blamed for the defeat, or who's going to get to use the first road out of there, right, as they come under increasingly heavy attack. The other one is Turkish Air Force would like to do much more around Kasab. And watch for this to happen now. This might well be the next step. As we wrote yesterday, Turkish Air Force units are effectively deterred by the presence of Russian S-300 and indeed quite possibly, Russian S-400 long-range anti-aircraft missiles. Those are very, very capable missiles. The British fly into this area. What the British do is they start at the Akrotiri Air Force Base on Cyprus. This is a sovereign base of the British Royal Air Force. And they fly over Turkey, and then they turn into Iraq. And supposedly the British attack ISIS forces in Iraq, right, the area that ISIS holds. So far, not Syria. It's said that Cameron is about to go to the Parliament again, right, the House of Commons, and demand authorization to do that. I would not trust Cameron. I think those British forces ought to be under somebody else's command. So I think this is now the situation. It is a desperate bid by Erdogan to prevent the coalescence of an actual international anti-ISIS coalition. ISIS represents the destruction of human civilization as we've known it. It must be eliminated, smashed, annihilated, extirpated. And there's no way around that, right? This is not the time for pacifism. It's not the time for people who, we've lived through many decades of unjust wars. The war against ISIS is a just war. Putin is waging it, and even the U.S. is waging it, which is at least something. However, the war against ISIS is being sabotaged by the accomplices of terrorism. And they are in Ankara and in Istanbul, and they have got to be exposed. It's also an argument against NATO. I don't want the United States to be dragged into a war by an adventurer, a tin pot dictator, a fascist like Erdogan. So forget Erdogan. So we'll be back in just a minute with more on World Crisis Radio. Welcome to the second hour of World Crisis Radio. It's our Thanksgiving weekend program. I sincerely hope we can get to some happier themes, but we've got to cover the very dangerous event which has occurred today. The out-of-control pro-terrorist government of Turkey has violated international law, violated Syrian airspace by shooting down a Russian Sukhoi 24 fencer on what I believe to be a reconnaissance mission over the key area of Kasab. If you want to know where Kasab is, go to tarpley.net, look at the morning briefing of the United Front Against Austerity and the Tax Wall Street Party, and take a look at the map that you'll find there, and it's got a red circle around Kasab, exactly the area where this Russian plane was brought down. And, of course, that map was posted 12 hours before any shooting went on in the air involving a Russian plane, and therefore the reason for all this was clear to our readers even before it happened. It is that the area around Kasab, other areas inside that red circle, are the areas where ISIS is closest to military collapse, to being enveloped, to being encircled, to being pocketed. In particular, all the terrorist forces inside Latakia province, and there are some, are dependent on certain very limited logistical areas. So there's a good chance that they're going to be essentially cut off and destroyed, right? Stalingrad, the model, or other similar battles. The defeat of ISIS-Daesh and its fellow terrorists is increasingly no more than a question of time. So the Russians have S-300 and S-400 long-range anti-aircraft missiles, but they didn't shoot those over the Turkish border. They easily could, but because the range is certainly there. But they didn't do that. It was the Turks who were the aggressors. And remember, the Turkish doctrine is that they demand the right to surveil your airspace, your Syrian airspace, 8 kilometers in. So they've actually created their own safe haven for terrorists, because the Syrian Arab Air Force has a hard time contending with them in that belt. And that belt, of course, is then immediately occupied by terrorist rebels. So this entire scandal cries out to the heavens: expose Erdogan, get him out of there. Obama declared that Article 5 of NATO is not operative, that there will be no intervention by the United States on the side of this adventurer and tin pot dictator. As Putin says, it is a stab in the back by the accomplices of terrorism. And that means Erdogan, and that means Davutoglu, of course. We already documented last week that many Americans, from Geraldo Rivera on Fox News to the op-ed page of the New York Times, they've understood more and more that Turkey and Saudi Arabia are your enemies. Russia is your friends. I would have to say now, in the C-SPAN comments, callers in, after the joint press conference of Obama and President Hollande of France, the first two, we had a Democrat saying, I don't care about Assad, smash ISIS. I don't care about Assad. Good. Don't use Assad as an excuse to preserve ISIS. And then a Republican who said essentially the same thing. Join with France, Russia, and the rest of the civilized world for a no-holds-barred, no-punches-pulled attack on ISIS. Crush them within a month. And you're going to see, once their supply lines into Turkey are cut, they wither on the vine. They die quick. And that's what has to happen. I would have to say also, before we get to this press conference, this morning we had General Wesley Clark. Oh, my God, militarily pathetic. At least, however, he's on the party line, right? Let's just jump ahead. The party line of the White House is, we don't know. We are not sure. It's not clear. We don't know if the Russian plane had gone into Turkish airspace. Well, of course, we know that it didn't, but in somebody like Obama, right, it's great to hear. We don't know. It's not clear. We're still studying it. We don't have all the information, he said at another point. Wesley Clark, just militarily, right? He thinks of the air support for the Syrians or for anybody as purely tactical battlefield stuff, right? Where you have to have the spotters and you call in the strikes. Hey, what about strategic? Interdict the Jarabus corridor. It comes down to a few roads. It's not that much. Block those roads, strafe those roads, bomb those roads, bomb the bridges, bomb. And then ISIS begins to slow down even more, and they begin to wither on the vine. I also have to warn you, watch out for Richard Engel on NBC. Richard Engel lives in Istanbul, so he knows pretty well that he better not offend Mad Dog Erdogan, because if he does, maybe the situation in his hometown of Istanbul there on the Bosporus is going to get too hot for him. Okay. Now, let's look at the Hollande-Obama press conference. I was fortunate enough to be invited just now to appear on Press TV, and today, Tuesday the 24th, they may post that. In that case, please do take a look. So the idea was this. This is now Hollande coming to Washington, D.C., and then he's going to go to Moscow and meet with Putin. So he comes to Obama. And the request to Obama is the obvious: work with Russia to destroy ISIS. What in the world could stand against a combination of Russia and the United States? Nothing. Nothing can stand against that. That is going to be decisive. I would also say to Obama, fire some of your subversive generals. Fire some of those disgruntled, insubordinate characters there in the Pentagon. I saw one of them on, you see them all over the place, right? Essentially bad-mouthing Obama, right? Those guys are insubordinate. Fire some of them. And what they recommend is, well, it's completely irresponsible, right? They all want escalation. So, escalation. Obama says, we must avoid escalation. Obama says, we must discourage escalation. Obama, I thought in this press conference, was relatively balanced. He seems to be holding up. There are all those lunatic, psychotic neocon and humanitarian bomber voices around him saying, now's the time to attack. Look good. The press will love you. Yeah, the press. The American people won't love you if you drag them into a war on this kind of a threadbare, idiotic pretext. Obama spoke of a potential convergence between the United States and Russia. I believe that is probably what he really wants. It's going to be a whole lot better for him. So see.